For a very, very long time, there have been tens of millions of people in this country who have struggled with food insecurity. 35 million people faced hunger in 2019, and then the pandemic hit. 60 million people in 2020 turned to the charitable food system for help. African Americans are now 3.2 times more likely to be food insecure in this country than whites. Hispanics and Latinos are 2.5 times more likely to be food insecure than whites. Native Americans continue to be 3 times more likely to be food insecure than whites. So what we saw was that this pandemic exacerbated a challenge that was already there. On the health side, people facing hunger are more likely to struggle with the chronic diseases that made the coronavirus more lethal. The trauma that people have experienced even before the pandemic has been so compounded by the trauma of the pandemic. I think there's a perception that people with living experience of hunger aren't participating in the economy, that they're not getting out there and working. That has not been our experience. It's in spite of doing everything that people can to elevate themselves that so many people find themselves unable to feed themselves and their families. We have data that came out during the pandemic that established what we always kind of knew, which is that for millions of children in this country, the most nutritious meal that they have access to is in school. So when schools shut down, what does that mean for these children? We have data that shows that if children don't get access to the food that they need in the first 1,000 days of life, there are certain connectivities that will never be made in their whole lives. Our volunteers are inordinately over 65, and we knew that medically it was most challenging for that very community who had been so foundational to the work that we did. So our network had to turn on a dime, and it truly did. Shifted from that come into the building approach to us going out into communities. We rely very heavily on donations from manufacturers and from retailers. And if they're having supply chain issues, then they certainly can't provide us with the donated product that we need in order to be able to fulfill the promise of the work that we do. The current estimate is with the USDA, their estimate is that they're going to decrease the amount of food that they provide inside of the charitable food system by 30% next year. And I'm concerned that we will not be able to continue under this level of stress for a whole lot longer. So we're going to have to come together as a community of people who decide that food insecurity is not acceptable. We don't have to have chronic food insecurity in the richest country in the history of civilization. And the first step is to decide that we won't.